When we hear about an orphanage, our hearts are saddened by the fact that there are children who cannot grow up in a home with their families. At least we are comforted knowing that if the orphanage is run by nuns, they will be well taken care of. After all, a series of to God to take care of these unprotected children. This story we are about to shed is not shocking, but it will fill you with anger as you think about little Ryan and the role the nuns played in his story. Ryan was always a small boy and was born to parents who may not have been ready to raise a child. At first his mother tried, but she fell into an undesirable lifestyle that was not conducive to raising a child. Her son did not develop at the same pace as other children, and she found it difficult to take responsibility. Unfortunately for him, Ryan's father had a problem with alcohol and spent most of his money on alcohol, and most of the time they didn't even know his son existed. After the neighbors must have alerted the state social services took Ryan, already 5 years old, from his biological parents. The court ruled that the parents did not have money to take care of the boy, and that it was left behind. It was placed in an orphanage to be safe. The nearby orphanage was run by some nuns, and it was the choice logical since it was close to his parents' apartment in Casa. They wanted to visit him, and the authorities were sure the nuns would take good care of this little boy. Not even in their wildest dreams could they imagine what could happen next. The authorities put their faith in a group of nuns to ensure that these women were serving God and that this would be the safe and necessary haven for Ryan to grow up in an orphanage to care for the children. The state provides a sum of money for each children per month to meet every physical need. In countries where social services face many cases of child neglect or abuse, they may not have the time to closely observe the cases. However, this orphanage unfortunately abused the trust they gave you by allowing it to operate with little supervision, while for the nuns all that mattered were money. For every child they could take into the orphanage, their budget would be increased. This allowed them to start using the money for their personal needs. If no attention is paid to finances, it is easy for the money to be misused for personal gain. That's exactly what started happening here. Cutting the food budget allowed the nuns to buy things they otherwise couldn't afford. When little Ryan comes to the orphanage, he is emotionally stressed. No matter how unhealthy the circumstances may be home, a child wants to be with his parents. A child who is separated from his biological parents will experience a lot of emotional pain. This was the case with Ryan. After he cried a lot and didn't even want to eat, the nun saw the sick little boy as just another number and didn't even trying to meet his emotional needs. His constant crying was bothering them, so they decided to move him to a room at the far end of the orphanage. Once a day they gave him a small plate of food to eat. For the rest of the day he locked himself in a room all by himself at least. Now his constant crying was less audible. Little Ryan started to lose weight. It was getting weaker day by day, and since no one was taking care of him, they started to lose his mobility and his legs and arms became weak. Malnutrition began to affect his thoughts. His brain was not receiving food and weakened, and his skin became almost transparent, while unnatural hair began to grow all over his body. This happens when a person is very malnourished. Sleeping in a cold room all day and night with only a thin blanket was not enough to keep them warm and safe. What were they thinking out of the nuns who were allowing this to happen? Wasn't there at least one woman among them who could stop this? All these cruel women were worried about keeping Ryan alive just so they could continue to receive his monthly amount of money. What was meant for the benefit of the children and the maintenance of the facility became their personal expenses. When people visited the orphanage wanting to adopt, Ryan was kept hidden. The orphanage staff knew that if anyone saw him, it could damage the reputation of the facility. Furthermore, they did not encourage adoption because every child that leaves would result in less money in their pockets. Then there was little hope for Ryan to escape his circumstances. He was destined to die there, and no one would miss him. But on the other side of the world, hope was coming. Brigitte and David March were extraordinary people. They always had a big heart for orphans and vulnerable children. A few years ago, they adopted a little girl named Kitty, who was abandoned because she suffered from Down syndrome. They founded a fun charity that aimed at helping the most vulnerable orphans around the world. They were going to an orphanage in a foreign country to bring food aid and deliver the aid collected by their foundation to help orphans. Brigitte and David visited the very orphanage where Ryan was staying. Brigitte was walking through the dark corridors looking at a bathroom when she heard a strange noise behind the door. At first she thought it was an animal that had been caught in a trap. What was waiting for her behind the door was almost unimaginable. Lying on a pile of blankets was a very thin boy, almost blind, life making only soft noises. Brigitte couldn't help but burst into tears. Ryan was in a terrible state. The couple knew immediately that they had to intervene. They also understood that this was going to be an uphill battle, but they were determined to rescuing Ryan by adopting him. Adopting from a foreign country is always a difficult process, but this wouldn't be the first time they tried. Brigitte and David had to know. Secondly, they wanted to convince the authorities to investigate the orphanage. It is clear that the nuns were not cared for Ryan, and there were probably some other unacceptable practices going on at the orphanage. Although it took time to convince the authorities to investigate, when the story spread on social media, an official investigation was launched into the operation of this nun-run orphanage. How could people who were supposed to be filled with compassion let children suffer while they were interested in money? After an uphill battle, little Ryan was allowed to leave the orphanage with his newfound family. Kitty would with another brother. Doctors had little hope that Ryan would survive, but the March family was willing to fight for the boy's life. Since it was rescued from the orphanage, it has undergone various therapies to help strengthen his leg muscles by giving him some ability to move, to fight for his underdeveloped brain function. It also subjected you to special therapies with tireless work and patience. His parents are helping Ryan develop to his full potential. The March family's purpose in life is to provide a safe environment for their children by meeting all basic needs like food and shelter, encouraging them to grow to their full potential, never allowing others to determine their destiny. The family added another abandoned children in their close circle after no distinction between other children are all treated equally. So what can we learn from this story? Always be alert for children who need help. Our good deeds are seen and rewarded by God. Parenting is a big responsibility, but all children deserve the care and love they can get from a family. At least this story has a happy ending. What do you think about this story? Tell us your thoughts through comments.